Welcome to episode 1 of Voices from Frontlines, KangLi Collaborative's new podcast series. My name is Kevin Vollmers, one of the 2 co-founders of KangLi Collaborative. We're recording today at the studios of our podcast series partner, KRSM Radio 98.9 FM, which is based in the Powderhorn neighborhood of South Minneapolis. Ryan Stapera, KangLi's other co-founder, and I are incredibly grateful for our partnership with KRSM and the Headwaters Foundation for Justice, which has graciously underwritten this podcast series. During today's conversation, we'll hear from members of the Twin Cities public education community, which quickly activated to counter the violence, trauma, and chaos caused by the recent U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement occupation in Minnesota, aka ICE's Operation Metro Surge. Our hope is that the lessons learned by those who were on the front lines against the federal occupation will serve as a resource to those in other communities across the United States. Our guests today are Superintendent Zena Stenvik, Coach Carolyn Teichner, and Principal María Graver. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
All right, let's get into it. My first question is for Superintendent Stenvik and Carolyn. When did the Columbia Heights School District begin to see ICE presence? And what was the immediate impact on students, families, and your staff?
So we actually began preparing over a year ago in February 2025 with Know Your Rights presentations for our families and our staff. Additionally, our administrative team began preparing protocols for how to respond if an ICE agent were to, at that time, what we understood would potentially happen if they were to come to our schools with a signed judicial warrant. Of course, that's not at all what happened. In late October, we started having neighbors and community members on our school corners at arrival and dismissal. And I want to say December 8th, 2025 is when several ICE agents entered into our local Mexican grocery store and took several employees. Fast forward through winter break. At the end of our winter break, Saturday, January 3rd, is the first time ICE was parked in our parking lots. And so I was actually at my sister-in-law's funeral, and a principal called me. And of course, if a principal calls their superintendent on a Saturday without a text message first, you know something's going on. And then a second principal called me with photos because, of course, schools are open on Saturdays and Sundays. We're very busy at our high school with play practice and basketball practice and whatnot. And so, I couldn't leave our family funeral. And so I contacted our school board chair and asked if she would go and represent in my place and confront the ICE agents that were parked there and tell them that they needed to leave our property. That was the first time she was doxxed. They scanned her license plate, her car, her face, and then recited her full legal name and her address to her. And again, she told them that they needed to leave. So that was the first. Wow. So it's been a while, but January 3rd was the first time on our campus.
And I remember being at Aquila and talking with Principal Graver during bingo night in December. I think it was around like the 12th or something. And things were just starting to pick up. We were just starting to see some activity, and we were talking about what we were seeing in both districts and how things were going. And then it just continued to escalate throughout December. And we started first seeing the effects of it towards the last week or two of school before winter break in December, when we started having kids not come to class. Families were afraid, and we were missing them in their classrooms already back in the last couple weeks of December. And we had to some events started to get canceled. Like we had our liaison was planning a holiday celebration with some of our families, and they had purchased gifts and things for the kids. And we had to shift to a delivery method of those gifts along with emergency food drive. And we delivered, I can't even remember how many already in December, gifts and groceries and essentials before winter break, because we knew that our families were going to need that before school was done for break. And we had hoped that we hoped that things would dissipate a little bit over winter break, and it sounded like it did not. They were parked at grocery stores and all over the city, and including school. So we were we started seeing the effects already in December.
Yeah, that reminds me, our big Toys for Tot event, which was the first Saturday of winter break, where parents can come and kind of shop around for toys for Christmas or the holidays. We did a lot of deliveries it was very low turnout. And so Crystal and I drove the school van, and delivered boxes of toys out to families. That's right. I forgot about that.
And then we came back to from winter break, and
on January 5th.
And some of our families returned that had not been at school, and we were so excited to see everyone. We still had some families that were cautious from what had happened over winter break. And then the second day back after winter break was when one of our students and her mother was taken on the way to school. And that's when it really became real, really real. I mean, it was real before that, but that's when it became really real, when Dad came running into the building before school started, and our assistant superintendent happened to be there that day because our principal was out sick, and Dad came in looking for his daughter because ICE had told them that they were going to drop her off at school, and they never did. So it was a real wake up 2 days into the new year.
Thanks to you both. Principal Graver, same question. When did the St. Louis Park School District begin to see ICE presence, and what was the immediate impact on students, families, and staff?
Sure. So similar to Columbia Heights, St. Louis Park Public Schools began making plans last year, February, March, just as to what we would do should ICE agents appear on our campuses. And we had a very similar protocol, expecting a signed judicial warrant. And again, as we know, that's not how it happened. Last year as well, at our spring conferences, at the end of February, we started offering DOPA clinics, so designation of parental authority, for our families whose TPS, temporary protected status, were starting to expire, which is many of our families. We are lucky to be the home to many, many families that are new to the country, and many of them had TPS status, and that was starting to expire. And so we wanted to ensure that if our families needed support with their students or were taken, that there was a parental authority. So we started to hold those clinics and pass out the red cards that come from Fuji's family. I know maybe Columbia Heights also relies on Fuji's family for support. That's a great resource. We were also, so that was happening throughout the summer. I received texts and emails from a couple of our families who were offering at the beginning of the school year to start watching, and these were offers that we didn't take them up on right away. However, we were paying attention as a staff at Aquila Elementary to what was happening in Chicago. Aquila, as I said, is home to a large number of families that are new to the country, and status or not status, they're new to the country in terms of immigration status. And so we were just keenly aware, and we had a plan as a staff as to what that would look like. And so we actually began seeing the effects before Metro Surge started. So annually we have a celebration for Dia de los Muertos, which is November 1st, 2nd, depending upon when it falls. And we did not hold that this year because families were not coming out. This year in the fall, for our fall conferences, we offered conferences online because families were not coming out. We shifted we have a baile program where one of our liaisons, Carmen, comes and does baile folklorico with our students. That used to be after school. We shifted that to be completely during the day. And so things just started shifting. I know the ICE surge, Metro Surge, officially started December 1st. As early as December 4th, we had ICE presence not parked in our lots, but circling our campus and then in the aggregate housing surrounding our campus. And I remember December 4th very clearly because we had ICE agents circling, one in a marked car and others that were clearly also ICE agents, and we had a number of students that we were releasing from play practice, and students across race and across cultural background. And so typically when you pick your child up from play practice, the students just come out. And we didn't want to alarm the students. And we didn't necessarily have time to communicate with families as they were already parked in our roundabout. So we walked them out one by one as ICE agent circles. That was December 4th. And from then on, we had significant presence pretty consistently. December 19th was our day before winter break. We got all of our students, elementary students, out and onto the buses, dismissed just fine. And at that point, we did have our neighborhood watch group, who's a huge support to us, just patrolling our sidewalks up and down around the school in cars and on foot with whistles to alert us to anything. December 19th, we got our elementary students home safely. And then I received a text from one of our bus drivers who also works at our site indicating that she saw ICE presence throughout the Aquila community, and letting me know, reminding me that our middle school buses were about to start showing up. It was about 3:40. They come around 4. And so at that time, I reached out to our assistant superintendent, our superintendent, the middle school principal, to ask her to hold the bus. And we were able to divert that middle school bus to deliver students to Aquila, where we brought them inside and then brought them home one by one while ICE agents were still circling. So early December, and then it just continued to the point where, as Superintendent Stenvik and I were talking about earlier, on January 14th, we had to halt dismissal because doors were being kicked down across the street, and our students were seeing that.
Superintendent Stenvik, your district and your leadership made international news in the days following January 20th, when ICE agents showed up at the house of 5-year-old Liam Conejero Ramos. Can you please describe your leadership approach prior to and leadership approach after that moment?
Sure. So as a leader, I've always prioritized being collaborative. And so I think it stems from playing team sports as a kid. So everyone has a role and everyone plays a really important role in order to achieve our goals, right? And working together and collaborative. Collaboration requires listening to one another and valuing other people's perspectives and skills and talents and whatnot. So that's on the one hand. On the other hand, a lot of life circumstances have led me to, or kind of shaped me to be a person who will fiercely fight for our children, and really having deep empathy for what our families are going through. And so that sort of rounds out, I would say, my leadership style. And leading to that day of January 20th, that afternoon when Liam and his father were taken, Liam was our 4th student of 7 total who were apprehended and detained. And in fact, he was our 2nd student that day on January 20th. So that morning, 3 of our high school students were driving to school in their car and were stopped by a group of armed, masked, unidentified agents. And they took one boy and the other 2 took the car and came to the high school. So I spent the morning with them. And then that afternoon, I knew I couldn't drive students home in our school van because we had a board meeting. And sometimes, the driving takes till into the evening. And so I was in my own vehicle behind our high school, which is just a couple blocks from Liam's home. And I got the call, please come to the corner of X and Y. So I arrived just moments after Liam and his father had been taken, to a scene that was so distraught. So, people, there were community members there, board members, city council members, there were many tears. And so I just said, where's the child? Here I am, I can take him. And they said they took him. I just couldn't believe it, right? And so a lot of things unfolded that I can certainly share the details of, locating who are all the children that live at this home. And that's when we realized, well, Liam's older brother was still at middle school and would be coming home momentarily. Went in the home, trying to console Liam's mother. She asked us to speak up and she wanted us to share the story. And because for many, many weeks I had been receiving media requests and would absolutely not speak to the media. It was very risky to do so. You know, it puts a target on our back. I collaborated very closely with our school board chair, and we decided we would decide together, and it had to be on the scale of helpful versus harmful, right? And you know, Columbia Heights is small. We enjoy flying under the radar, and you know, we're not big like Minneapolis and St. Paul, who are always on the news. So we did not want to speak up. But it just got to the point where that, you know, that day was really a tipping point. And then Liam's mom asking us to speak up, and then our community member Allie Daniels allowing us to use that image that she took. So that morning I called at 6:00 in the morning. I called our school board chair and I said, I woke up just with this theme in my head of we need justice for 5-year-olds and all of these children. I said, let's go, let's talk, I'm ready. She said, let's do it. So that afternoon we held a press conference in Liam's classroom. So, you know, rounding that out, I guess my leadership style when it comes to caring for children, and also my staff who have been greatly impacted, it's relentless.
Thank you for that. Principal Graver, according to an early December Star Tribune article, it appeared as though ICE agents targeted your school because of the backgrounds of a large portion of your student body and their families. Can you please share how you, as a principal within a larger district, activated and worked with members of the community that make up the city of St. Louis Park?
Yeah, and I think that the last part of your question is really, really the most important in terms of how we were able to, or how we have been able to keep our Aquila community as relatively safe as we have been, and that is through great partnerships with individuals and then community partners throughout St. Louis Park, but particularly the Aquila neighborhood. And so to that end, we have a number of parents who have built a network, including our parent-teacher organization, have built a network of folks who are driving kids home, bringing food, ensuring that we have our sidewalks patrolled. And none of this would have been possible without our initial partnership with Westwood Church. So that partnership has been ongoing, but most recently in the fall, Westwood Church opened itself up to our community of families who are acquiring English, and started inviting all of our families to come for Wednesday night meals and have community conversation circles. And while those community conversation circles were not, due to the presence of ICE and fear of ICE agents, as well attended as we had initially hoped, what did happen is that that infrastructure, that safety net of trust was beginning to be built. So we had Westwood Church partnering with our broader community and our PTO within that as well. Although we as school employees were not allowed to drive kids, obviously for liability issues, we were not to have our staff walk students home. We were to rely on the community. Although that was the case, we did have school employees like Antonio Olivos, Carmen Rudin, who are our liaisons, who were able to communicate with families and be that bridge to ensure that families could trust the folks that were transporting kids, the folks that were bringing food. So all of that to say, in short, without the broader St. Louis Park and Aquila communities, we would not have been able to keep our students safe at Aquila, and also I would say the middle school students who are dropped off near Aquila every day. And Aquila, to your point about our population, Aquila is just this beautifully racially, linguistically, culturally complex reflection of the world. And it's not that it's unlike other parts of St. Louis Park, but it is definitely, we have the largest numbers of students who are coming from all over the world, which makes us amazing. And it also, in this case, made us a target.
Thank you for that. That's a good segue to you, Carolyn. Reflecting back upon the ICE surge as a staff at Columbia Heights School District and a parent in the St. Louis Park School District, what were the commonalities and differences between the activation of your employer and your home district as a family?
I think going off of what Principal Graver was saying about the community, I think that was a huge similarity. Our community in Columbia Heights also stepped up in all the same ways that Principal Graver is talking about. We had parents taking home additional kids. We had community members that had no connection to our school except that they lived in Columbia Heights, taking home kids, carrying groceries with the kids to take with them home. We had the streets in front of the school patrolled both at drop off and pickup. I mean, in so many ways, the community just stepped up and was there as soon as we needed them. And we had more people coming to us than we knew what to do with at first. Like, we had to get ourselves organized and figure out what the needs were to be able to utilize the people that wanted to help. And so I was out front at dismissal every day, and it was both heartbreaking to see all of these kids going home with people other than their families, but heartwarming at the same time. It was so conflicting, but I would literally have tears in my eyes watching a parent or a community member take a kid that wasn't theirs and help them into the car and with their grocery bags and all their things. It was amazing to see. And while I couldn't be on the grounds in St. Louis Park because I was in Columbia Heights, I knew the same things were happening in Columbia Heights. Our PTO organized a support form so that people could say how they wanted to help and how they could help. And with the liaisons, helped get all of that support to the families that needed it. I think the difference is just a perspective difference. Because I'm a staff member in Columbia Heights, I knew what was happening from the inside and from the outside, whereas as a parent in St. Louis Park, I really only saw what was happening on the outside. But it felt like in both places, there was just so much support and love and hope. Like, although it was scary and our families were scared and so much was happening and it felt chaotic all the time, there was also hope because all these people were banded together and we're really there to support our kids in both areas. I think about Superintendent Stenvik talks about the press conference in Liam's classroom. There was also a press conference across the street from Aquila early in January
14th.
Yeah, and that was really the community coming together and the school board to say, we've had enough already. We need ICE to not be at our schools. We need ICE to not be interrupting our students' days. We need our kids to be safe. And my husband and my younger son and I attended it. And when we left, we saw Principal Graver and a bunch of teachers standing at the building right across the street cheering. And as a educator in another district, I just knew what was happening to their hearts and how supported and proud they felt by the community.
I'll add, in terms of the coordination and organization, in the early days of the Metro Surge, there were a small number of people wanting to do like everything and many things. And then our community started hosting, one of our churches opened up their doors and started hosting community trainings in which 7 different roles were identified. And so it was really important that if a person was delivering groceries to vulnerable homes, that they weren't also out patrolling the streets. They needed to keep those cars, safe spaces. And at one of the trainings, there were over, like 250 people there. And so we had a kind of a school support breakout session where one of our parents stepped up as to be the parent coordinator and volunteer of the people standing on the corners. And we knew that they couldn't only stand on the corner in front of the school, but it had to be 3 blocks up as well, because that's where ICE was looming and lurking. And then our community leaders would come together every weekend. We had community leader meetings at that church. So the mayor, other community leaders, just to share updates, strategize, and plan. I mean, at one point, was it January 7th when Renee Good was murdered? And then shortly thereafter, Alex Preddy. So we started planning for what to do in that case in our own community. You know, what is the role of the school district? What is the role of the mayor? What is the role of the city council? And then, of course, we met with the police and fire departments as well in terms of crisis response. And it was very different when we met in the early days of COVID with the police and fire, because they kind of had a map for us. They had a playbook. With this, there really was no playbook. The jurisdiction was so different. But I just wanted to reiterate, highly, highly organized. Every church in Columbia Heights came together and would support us in those meetings and trainings. And but there were some really dark days at the trainings. We also had an EMT train us on the Stop the Bleed training, how to use tourniquets. I mean, bullets were flying in the streets at that point. I mean, when that started happening, I had to direct the schools to have indoor recess and pull kids inside. Because, and I think you had to do the same, right?
Yeah, we used the standard response protocol, so we would call a secure if ICE agents were too close and pull everyone inside. Or there was a day that I stood outside for 3 hours of recess working with my computer on a tall desk so that I could watch the parking lot and kids could play.
I mean, we didn't do our regular jobs during that time. No one did. We all took on completely different roles, and somehow our HR and finance kept the balls rolling, and people still got paid and whatnot. So it was really about taking on different roles, and sticking to those roles.
And we wouldn't have been able to do the amount we did without the community, because
that's right.
At the beginning, our teachers all wanted to go to all their kids' homes. They wanted to see their kids, know they were okay, and make sure that those families knew how much we cared about them. And they had those personal connections. They've been sending messages back and forth all the time. Our teachers are responding to messages at all hours of the day to make sure that families are getting what they need. And we had to give some of that to community members and our PTO members and things that were willing to do some of those deliveries, because it just was not sustainable for our teachers to continue to do all that as much as they really, really wanted to.
We, schools are always hubs in the community, right? Resource hubs. And we all, I'm sure, had food pantries and resources prior to Metro Surge. But fortunately and unfortunately, we became highly organized food distribution centers. We literally, in one of the basements of one of our elementary schools, have a mountain of diapers that were donated. I mean, the donations were flooding in, and we're so appreciative. And we're only able to systematize and have these regular, weekly, robust deliveries because of that community support. I continue to stress, though, to our staff, do not normalize this, because it became so highly organized, a well-oiled machine. So I'm very proud of all of the schools in the metro area for stepping up, the schools that were impacted, and of course our schools in Columbia Heights for doing the right things for kids and families. And at the same time, it's very heartbreaking that people had to do that.
Absolutely.
I was just going to add that things were highly organized, yet constantly changing. So we had a plan, and we went with that plan, and then circumstances changed and more families needed support. And then that plan wasn't sustainable that way anymore, and we had to shift and do it differently. And it was constantly working like that. And then we, our district shifted many kids to online learning, which we haven't talked about yet. And then that changed the dynamic of what the kids needed, and a lot of families were no longer coming to school, or kids weren't getting rides to school because they were staying at home.
Well, and you shifted class rosters. You moved this whole group of children into a whole different classroom so that teacher could go online.
Yeah, we had some of our classroom teachers that moved online, so kids needed to move classes, and so things were just constantly changing and evolving. And so yet, while there was all this systematic organization, it was constantly changing too, and evolving with the needs of our families and what was happening that week.
And Carolyn likes to be very organized and have a plan. And so thank you for being flexible with all of your planning and work, because, it was crisis mode. We had to do it.
Yeah, so it was similar in St. Louis Park. There was sort of a hesitancy to move to online learning, and then that shift came just at the beginning of February, where our staff was given were given a couple of days to build those courses, and then we shifted district personnel to teach those classes, and our students that went online were able to go online, and unless they had specialized services or different circumstances, they needed to be online until the end of the semester. So we have many students that will be coming back after spring break that have been online. But we also had families that just left the state, just gathered up and left the state, and that happened prior to us having e-learning as an option, which meant we didn't have the opportunity to send them with devices. And so that was really difficult and also concerning. It was concerning when our families stopped coming to school, which happened for us. It started happening just towards the end of November, before November break. We had some families stop, and then at the beginning of December, because and I'm not saying particularly that it was these particular families, but we have so many of our kids whose nutrition comes from school.
Yeah.
And so when we don't know the status of students, and we can't get a hold of families, that's a big concern for us.
We had a student who, our social workers and office staff do such a nice job of trying to locate and reach out to students if they've been, absent for several days. Mm-hmm. And they, work really hard to track them down and find out if they've moved out of state or somewhere else. We have a fifth grade student that we just could not find. And our staff learned how to look into the ICE database to see if people, or it's a public database, to see, so they were looking for this child in all, in all different places, not able to find her. And it wasn't until, another student at that school was finally returned from the Dilley Detention Center in Texas that he told us, "Oh, I saw my classmate down there. She's there."
Wow.
So that's the only way we found out, was from another fifth grader that his
she
classmate.
wasn't in the database.
She was not in the database. So for, in terms of tracking people down, because that's a constant question that I have for our principals, like, where are you at with your lists? How many are you missing now?
Yeah.
Because we report to the counties and we work, with different social services and whatnot. But.
And we've seen that too. We've had a lot of families move out of state or self-deport.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just to avoid everything that's going on. And we have most of our elementary school students are back in person now, which has been amazing to see them all there. I know we still have quite a few secondary students that are online through
Waiting for that break.
Through the end of the quarter next week. But things were changing so rapidly that we did our initial online enrollment, and then the next week we had a huge batch of kids that really needed to be moved online also. So we had 24 hours basically to
create a whole entire school.
Get them enrolled, get all the materials to them that they needed, because we didn't want them to miss any more school. And while we know that online learning isn't the best for them, it was still better than them not having any school. So we really wanted to respond quickly so that they had what they need and could participate online.
I think too, the team who launched the online school did it with such care, and that they, made sure we had face-to-face Zoom classes, so they had connections with their teachers. They would Zoom into the classroom that they had left behind for lunchtime, and have connections with their friends. And then someone donated many birthday boxes. And so with those weekly meal deliveries, students would get a fun box, or sometimes a stuffed
art
animal,
kits,
and arts and crafts,
toys and Play-Doh and Legos and so many things that people wanted, because people wanted to do something, and we couldn't fix what was happening, but trying to bring some joy to our kids.
And that connection.
Yeah. We had similar things happen at Aquila. Our counselor, Jessie Case, and our social worker, Jenny Mikosh, they worked to put art kits together for students. I think to bring them joy, but also just as a means of processing trauma.
Yes.
And I think we've sort of skirted around it, but it's so interesting to me, the quick pivots that I feel we're able to make as educational systems now are, unfortunately, in my opinion, a direct result of the quick pivots we had to make during COVID.
Sure.
And so we have that ability now to shift quickly, and to your point, Carolyn, to meet some of the needs, if not all of the needs. And I think that's something that's been really difficult for me to come to terms with, which is some of the students that are not able to access school in person are some of our most vulnerable learners. And I know that they are getting part of what they need from e-learning, but it's definitely not the same. And I think about what that means for students who have had the early part of their education affected by COVID, and now this COVID and the murder of George Floyd, and then now the Metro surge, and for kids, for example, who are working to acquire English to be removed and have that opportunity sort of shortened, and for kids who are working to acquire English and have some specialized services needs, like what that means for them to be at home. And I think that when we think about the legacy of what this will mean for our students as they grow older, and how that will iterate through their lives, that's something that I spend a lot of time thinking about. And again, it's something that we will, as educators, have to keep unfolding. But
you talk about trauma, and as kids are coming back, and I'm seeing trauma in 3 different layers. So we have 7 children, 6 are returned to us that were detained. And they have a high degree, high level of trauma. And I'm never going to be the person who throws out the word trauma lightly. I'll never say, the children are traumatized. No, they're very resilient. But we are truly seeing it in 3 different layers. Then we have the children who have been sequestered in their homes for months. And as they're coming back, they're showing trauma responses at school as well. And then we have all of the other children who were never at any danger of being detained. But they're also asking, could I be taken? Will my mom be home when I get home from school today?
Where's my friend?
Noticing their friends. I was talking to a high school student who has siblings in the same grade as your 10-year-old who was taken at your school. And this high school student said, I know that the teachers and I know you guys really tried to keep things as normal as possible for us in school, but all the kids were aware of what was going on, but we do appreciate it. And when I would see the people out in their bright green vests on the corners, I said, how did that feel? Was that scary? And the student said, I felt seen and I felt cared for. And I was like, okay. But so that the trauma it's like I completely agree with you. It's going to be very long lasting. We've got a lot of work ahead of us.
Even if all of the ICE agents left right now and we had no more threat, there's still so much damage done.
We had a tornado drill 2 weeks ago, and the children who had to shelter in place were asked, are we sheltering because of ICE?
Oh my gosh.
Or a social worker told me that she had a child who saw an SUV outside of the school and was nervous. I mean, a distant fire engine siren is triggering for kids right now. It's lots of things.
And being in the building and seeing as kids are coming back, they're coming back not as themselves. They're exhibiting behaviors they did not have when they were previously at school. They're worried about someone being taken while they're at school. And so we tried to provide the best education we could to them online while they were online. And while it's great that they're back at school, they're not all ready to fully learn like they were before. And so there's a lot of work. There's a lot of things that will have to happen so that they can
trust again.
And they can learn. Their needs have to be met before they can fully absorb all of the content we are trying to teach them.
We have said more often than usual, you have to Maslow before you can bloom, right?
That's
so we
right.
talk about
That's right.
Maslow's hierarchy of need, right? Those basic survival skills. You have to be able to meet those needs before you can go up Bloom's taxonomy and have a higher order thinking. If you're living in your amygdala, fight or flight, you're not able to learn, nor should you be able to learn. You're just trying to protect yourself. And we say that, like, you have to Maslow before you can bloom. And we're still trying to deliver curriculum and facilitate learning that meets or exceeds state standards. And so there's tension there because we want all of these things for our students.
And our teachers have had to shift and do so much that was never required before. Not that any of it was required, but naturally teachers want to do everything they can for their
100%.
students and families. And so our teachers have done so much, and some of our teachers have been teaching online, and there's been so many shifts and so many things happening and so much support that our kids need that I still worry about our teachers and burnout and their capacity to be able to continue the way that they have been.
We've had an outpouring of support, right? So we've different organizations bringing in therapy dogs for the teachers. We've had secondary trauma trainings at our staff meetings for the staff. But I mean, I saw it with my own eyes that same day, that January 14 day, out back of the high school. We had multiple ICE agents, and we were trying to hold kids inside so they weren't dismissing. And our high school is right next to Carolyn's elementary school. 3 first grade teachers come running out of the elementary school, running to the back of the high school with whistles in their hand, and or around their necks, and went with some other staff members behind the high school into the parking lot, and worked as a collaborative team of like 4 or 5 ladies to chase out. I've seen the video, armed, masked, large guns, ICE agents out of the parking lot where our children live.
Well, and although we got our elementary kids safely where they needed to go, our high school dismisses after our elementary. So there were many days where we went over to, like, a lot of our elementary staff would go next door to the high school to be there for dismissal, because as we found out that ICE agents were approaching high school aged kids often, and those kids have even more awareness of what is going on, and they were scared to leave school and to come to school. And so we just had as many bodies as we could out there so that they could feel as safe as possible.
Carolyn, I'm really glad that you brought up the toll on teachers, because I think that we talk a lot about our practices and our protocols at a higher level, and I don't think that we have talked enough. Like I haven't talked enough, and I don't see enough articles, or I haven't seen much about what the toll is on teachers. And I think about our teachers who, and I'm sure you've both seen this as we are all educators, our teachers have been taught to take a bullet for our kids. And so they will, to your point about first grade teachers running to the high school, our teachers will protect our kids.
That's right.
With their own lives. Like, that is what we do as educators. And so I'm listening to what you're saying about having secondary trauma, facilitation of learning. And we've just done a little of that, but certainly not enough at Aquila. And I think about what I can do differently as a principal. We are still focused on the standards and ensuring that we are meeting students' academic needs, but really just hearing you talk about it makes me think about pausing and just
we also
giving
have
folks time.
Our bilingual, like, homeschool liaison staff as well, who have also been targets, right?
yes.
All of our Black and Brown staff
Absolutely.
have been carrying their passports.
Yep.
I've gotten phone calls from staff members. They're outside my house. I'm not going to make it in right now. I'm hiding in a closet. I mean, you name it, right? And so we have we contract with Washburn Services for mental health support.
Yep.
I wish I knew the official name of that great organization, but we have a Spanish-speaking therapist that we have contracted with, and so she was providing support to our bilingual staff, and a handful of them graduated from our high school. I remember them, so they're very young, in their early 20s yet, and so I mean, there's just so many layers to what you're referencing.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And some sense of normalcy helps people continue on. So we have to have some and structure
tasks
and things. So like having a normal day while we're in school is necessary for us as adults and for our kids. Also, that layered support continuing has to happen.
100%.
Like we can't do the support without the academics, and we can't do the academics without
Yeah.
support. It kind of has to go hand in hand,
Yeah.
which is really challenging,
Yeah.
and we have to find the time for it.
Yeah,
Well said.
that adaptive structure has to be undergirded by the technical pieces for sure.
Before we move on to the last part of this conversation, I just want to say, y'all educators do not get paid enough.
That's right.
You do not get paid enough because you have to be so flexible and so quick and so adaptive, and you have to know so much, and you have to be so immersed in the community, not just with your students and the families, but the city, the state. I just want to say how grateful I am for this conversation.
I would add, though, that if I can speak for myself, I cannot speak for Superintendent Stenvik or for Carolyn, but I don't think we as educators need to make more money. I think we need more funding for mental health supports for our kids. So if
fully
people are going
fund
to throw
public
money at
schools.
education, just fully fund us. Yeah,
Just fully fund public schools.
Yeah.
Whoever's
Okay.
listening, fully funded public schools, please.
And no more unfunded mandates.
I think
Yes.
I'm not in the classroom right now, but as a classroom teacher, I would totally agree and say, like, I would rather have less students in my class and all the
Mhm.
materials and support that I need rather than get paid more.
Yeah.
Like if because that would make my job
Yeah.
easier.
And it makes a better environment for student learning when
Mhm.
you have fully funded mandates. That's
According to reports, despite the drawdown, ICE very much remains in Minnesota. Their tactics have simply changed. Further, recovering from the impact of the violence, trauma, and chaos caused by the federal occupation will take years. For example, our friends at the Lake Street Council estimate that along the Lake Street corridor in Minneapolis, more than 1,000 immigrant-owned businesses lost a cumulative $46 million in December and January, during their busiest time, and many were forced to shut down temporarily. To our guests, this is a two-part question. We'll address the first, of course. First, are you seeing signs of potential long-term impact that the federal occupation will have on students and families? You have touched upon that. Many who lived through a global pandemic, the uprising after the murder of George Floyd, and now the Metro surge. If you can dig into that just a little bit deeper, that would be great.
I would say yes. We're definitely seeing the impacts that will be long lasting for our students, our families, and our staff. The signs and the trauma responses that the children are coming with. I've talked to many of our teenagers who have been pulled over or whatnot by, again, it's not like one ICE agent, it's 3 cars boxing them in. So it's a very traumatic experience. And one young man said to me, well, first in the morning, I would look out and make sure on our street that no one's there. So I watch my mom get into her car so she can get to work. And then but the other adult in the home can't go to work anymore because they're too afraid. So it's also children taking care of their parents or concerned about their parents. And then just the processing the experiences that they've gone through, this pervasive, long, sustained fear, like a cloud of fear, right? That has hung over our communities for our students and families and staff will take a long time to work through.
We talked a little bit about our students' trauma and our staff, but the families all together. Like, it's not just about our kids, because what's going on in the families affects them at school also. And our families needed rental assistance, still need rental assistance.
Well, and our families have already been through so much.
Yes.
The families that I've been working with are here seeking asylum
100%.
for a very real reason. They're here seeking asylum and are not able to safely return to their home countries.
So they're already bringing trauma from their home countries, many of them, and now having to deal with the trauma but in both communities, rental assistance has been huge. St. Louis Park, specifically Aquila, the community stepped up huge with a GoFundMe that
Raised over $20,000.
Yeah, that has primarily gone to rental assistance with STEP, which is St. Louis Park's emergency program. And then in Columbia Heights, all of the schools have had their own GoFundMes. And then there is the PTOs, yes. And then there's also a separate Columbia Heights general community mutual aid, which has done a lot of rental assistance. And then we also have parents trying to restart, basically. They couldn't work for a long time, so they need funds. But also now they're trying to find jobs. They're trying to get back into things so that they can make money for their families and keep things going. But it's not easy.
Gas prices
Yes.
are going up.
Yep.
We've have reports of families needing car repairs.
Yep.
Their cars have sat idle for a while.
Yeah.
Things
Or
like
they
that.
need to find somewhere else to live because they didn't know if they were going to make rent, and then they did get rental assistance, but it was too late, and the landlord
Yeah.
said, you're done after this month. So they're needing, and so parents are reaching out to our teachers for assistance with all of this too.
Yeah.
They're asking, like, I need somewhere else to live. Do you know where I can find a job? I mean, there's so many things that our families need that are going to take a long time to resolve, and that is all going to have an effect on our students.
I would agree with all of that. And I think you started to touch on it. So our families that are being targeted completely, I would say it is almost 100%, just racial profiling. Our families that came here seeking asylum, they came with very little or nothing to restart here. And so now they don't have necessarily like a savings that they can rely on if they're not going to work or be able to work for months. So I think that's going to continue to be like a steady climb, right? And then I also think about students that are DACA recipients that their whole lives have been disrupted. And then the other thing that I have been thinking about a lot is our students who are intersectional. So just in terms of the atmosphere right now, there's a metro surge, and then we have students who are affected by that. They're also part of the LGBTQ community and who are doubly affected. And so I think about what that's going to mean for our kids in terms of maintaining healthy identity and healthy self-concept and self-confidence. And I think that frightens me or concerns me as an educator, because in order for our students to demonstrate exactly who they are and how brilliant they are, they have to feel comfortable and confident doing that. And I think we have, and I don't think it's an accident, but maybe that's the conspiracy theorist in me. I think we have a whole group of students of color now that are closed off a little bit, or will be until we can find ways to help them to work through it.
Every chance I get, I tell them, you are loved and you
Yeah.
belong here.
Mhm.
We want you here.
You're exactly who you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
I think back for years now, we've had Latino families.
Yeah.
Parents will tell us they don't want to speak Spanish. The kids don't want to speak Spanish anymore. I'm afraid they're going to not keep their language and, because they want to fit in. And I worry, we as teachers always continue to convince the families and the kids, keep going.
Keep going.
Like,
Yep.
we will give you books in Spanish. We will give you whatever resources we can, because it's really important that you maintain your culture and be proud of it. And I'm worried about what's going to happen to kids and how much they're going to want to not appear to be different. And so telling them they're loved and who they are is important. And keeping that up, I think, is going to be really important for a long time, to make sure that they know that what they bring to our community is really special and important, and we wouldn't be the community we are without them.
That's right.
I agree with that.
Thank you. Second part of that question. Of the lessons learned and tactics and strategies utilized during the Metro Surge, which lessons do you believe are the most critical to address the impact that you're seeing in your students, families, and staff? And which strategies and tactics would you recommend folks outside of Minnesota to use against ICE in their own backyards?
I can start. So I've made it a point in my role to be very connected to community members and community leaders, right? Every year I meet with all of the clergy in town together, great relationship with the mayor, city council, Kiwanis, Boosters, Lions, the different organizations in our group. And I think that's critical to understand, as a school community, we are the greater community, right? And we need to be a reflection of the greater community and what the community wants to see. And so meeting with all of the PTOs and just hearing what the concerns are and what their desires and wishes are. So for me, it's like working as an integral part of the community and a reflection of the community It's might take some time and effort to plan all of that out, but it's time so well spent, and it pays back in dividends. When such a crisis like we've been going through occurs, boy, the community has sure stepped up.
And I know Columbia Heights is going to be celebrating the community and
Doing a gratitude event.
and all the support. And I just think about how we can continue those partnerships in the future. Like, we had people come from the community that might not be from the church or from one of those groups, but they just wanted to help.
Yeah.
And how can we keep those people involved and connected after we hopefully they aren't as necessary anymore. They will still be necessary, but have been such a value add.
That's right.
I would agree with all of that. I think that what we have seen here is what it looks like for folks to be less insular. I think at the end of the day, the tendency is to go home into your own abode, whatever that looks like, and to be there. And that certainly is something that I, as an introvert, understand. And just driving over here today, there was a sign on 38th Street that said, "Who's got your back? I've got your back. We are neighbors." And I think that is the greatest lesson and the greatest advice that I would give to any other city or neighborhood is that it matters that you are in community. So we say community is common unity, right? So in community with your neighbors and your neighborhood, and that you are aware, to your point, Superintendent Stenvik, of what your role is and what your locus of control is. Because if you try to step outside of that, you can go a little bit crazy trying to think about all the things that need doing. So ensuring that we're doing that. And then I don't think there's ever enough gratitude that you can show people, or ever enough care that you can show people. I'm a big fan of Audre Lorde, of radical welcome. I'm a big fan of radical self-care. And I think that that's something that we show each other here in the Twin Cities. I don't think it's a fluke that we got the John F. Kennedy Courage Award on March 19th. I think that's because we actually care about one another, to the point where, I am a brown-bodied woman, and I saw white person after white person after white person put themselves in harm's way in front of Black and brown bodies. I saw that at Whipple. I saw that here on the streets of Minneapolis. I'm sure it's happening in Columbia Heights. We have people putting their bodies in harm's way, and that to me is an incredible testament to the spirit of the broader community in Minnesota and the Twin Cities. I know that in St. Louis Park we have our Day of Unity on the 25th. It's a huge deal. So I love that Columbia Heights is doing that. I just think ensuring that we have those structures and networks in place, even when we don't need them, to your point, Carolyn, because we can shift maybe eventually and go back on with our lives, but just knowing your neighbors, being connected, and taking the time to be with people, even though we have really busy lives.
That's right.
And in Minneapolis, if we can do it in below zero
That's
weather,
right.
we always joke that, like, those days like yesterday where it's super nice out and everyone's starting to come out of their houses, that like, oh, it's starting to get to be spring. I'll see my neighbors again. But like, we saw our neighbors a lot more this winter than we ever have before.
Yeah.
And I think that just, usually we kind of hibernate in the winter, but this winter was different.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, thank you for all of this. And to express gratitude, I am incredibly grateful that we had the opportunity to speak together like this. And so thank you so much for your insights, the leadership, and the dedication that all three of you clearly show. To our listeners, thank you for listening to episode 1 of Voices from the Frontlines. Please be on the lookout for episode 2.
Thank you.